So after their FA Cup defeat at the hands of Chelsea, that's now 3 losses in the last 4 games for Liverpool. John, how important is it they get back to what they were this weekend against Bournemouth? Well, because they've got a huge Champions League game the following week.
Yeah, you spoke about perspective, and there's a lot being made about lost 3 in the last 4. I'd prefer to think we've lost 3, 4 including 1 last season in the last 70 or 80 matches. Now, it's easy to say now, but I don't think it was ever going to continue. Liverpool have been playing to their maximum and maximise their potential. Liverpool haven't necessarily got better players than any other team in the top 4 or 5. They have a great attitude, commitment, determination, harmony with the fans, which meant that they maximised their potential to do what they did. Now, if you look at 3 or 4 games before they lost, they ground results out. They weren't. I thought they were playing better last year than this year. So I'm not saying this was always going to happen, but there will come a stage in terms of what. Never mind this season. Last year we lost 1 game of the incredible run we had, where there was going to be a dip. Fortunately, with 20 odd points ahead, we are going to win the league. But it could be a huge week out of the FA Cup. Hopefully we don't go out of the Champions League, because if we go out of the Champions League while we are going to win the league, it'll be a bit of a damn squib at the end when we've won the league, because we win the league with maybe 7 games to go, and what do you play for?
I mean, perspective is required, because Jurgen Klopp's never been past that round in the FA Cup, because he clearly targets Premier League and the Champions League.
Yeah.
So that's why I say his perspective required. But is the problem, winning is a wonderful habit to have, and so is having momentum. So ahead of Atletico, they need to shake themselves down. Nobody's suggested for 1 second that they're not going to win the Premier League. Of course not.
Yeah, but the points gap's massive, and you're right. They need to get back to winning ways. But you've got to look at the game last night, for instance, against Chelsea. I thought they were brilliant. I think if it wasn't for the lack of cutting edge and finishing, they would have won that game comfortably. So I'd say before, obviously, the first loss, they've grinded out results. There were games where they should have been beaten. They've somehow managed to nick a goal at the end. But I don't think they've been necessarily playing bad of recent, especially, as I said yesterday, against Chelsea. They had chance after chance, and they just couldn't take them. So it's not that difficult to then turn it around, because full well if 1 or 2 of them go in, it's a completely different game. And I think Bournemouth as well, a team that's maybe on the decline a little bit, not playing too well, I think they'll get back to winning games. But again, Liverpool in the Champions League, when the second leg is at Anfield, it's a completely different kettle of fish. Does not matter how they're producing, playing their form or anything like that, for whatever reason. When they get teams in that second leg at Anfield, it's a completely different story.
But I think it's different playing Atletico Madrid and Barcelona. You say Barcelona is a better team than Atletico, but not defensively. And if they have to defend
prospects,
a lead,
isn't it?
And if they have to have 20% possession and not concede, that's what Diego Simeone does. So it was a huge shock to Barcelona, don't get me wrong, but I think it's going to be more difficult against Atletico. Plus the fact that depending on how the Bournemouth game goes, it'll be even more difficult. But as I said, listen, in the last 18 months, let's forget this season, what happened last year, we cannot criticise them any way, shape or form.
Nobody is. Nobody's criticised him. I thought it was a brilliantly phrased question by my colleague Patrick Davison after the Watford game. You did the game for us, John. He said to Jurgen Klopp, he said, "I'm not picking holes in a magnificent season, but did you see signs of this in the last few games?" So again, I think that is perspective.
But when he says he sees signs of it, there are games when he saw signs of it, but it didn't come, because the West Ham game and this season, Norwich the first game of the season, Tottenham, and he say when they win and they don't play well, if they had lost, you can say, well, I've seen signs of it. So we've seen signs in previous games, but they still got the job done, which is what they did. They just didn't have to do it in the last 2 games. And as I said, it's a blip, because they will play consistently well, and of course Mane and Salah will start to score again. So I really just think it is just one of those things that happens in football.
Is it hypothetical, or are we really seeing how much Liverpool miss Jordan Henderson?
Yeah, they miss him.
Not just for the role he plays, Darren.
No, it's the leadership, I think, because I think against Watford played very, very well, but I think a lot of the situations might have been avoided. Jordan Henderson. I mean, as I said, he's one of them players where it's unfortunate for himself that you only really fully appreciate him when he's not there. Like when he's on the pitch, people take him for granted. Like, what does he exactly do? What is he good at? But the moment you take him out of the equation, people start going, "Oh, we need Jordan Henderson back." And for himself, that's a little bit unfair in some regards. But I think he's a massive miss. He's their leader. Balls and screens. He pulls people into position, and I think that voice on the pitch is what they're really, really missing.
Liverpool have a clearly defined way of playing. How they play is they've got 3 hard-working midfield players who we could argue is not particularly creative, and we get our creativity, our energy, our flair from the 2 full-backs and the 3 strikers. Now, on the odd occasion that the 2 full-backs aren't creating and the 3 strikers aren't firing, that is when our lack of so-called creativity in midfield is apparent. So we're saying we need something more from midfield. Now, with our lack of creativity in midfield, we're 20-odd points ahead. We lost 1 game last year and we are where we are. very much like Manchester City, when every now and again they may not play well and they may lose, you then say they need more defensive players. But for 90% of the time, they're fine. So for Liverpool, it just happened that the fullbacks who create a lot and the three strikers didn't perform, and that's when we say we needed something more in midfield. But I would put up with that all day long for what we've actually achieved.
OK, I want to put to you two something that cropped up on the debate earlier in this week. Jamie O'Hara and Paul Merson. And the argument was, if Manchester City win both domestic cups and the Champions League, have they had a better season than Liverpool if they win the Premier League?
The best team in the country wins the league, the Premier League. You can be lucky in the cup because you can, play against...
To win 3
the draw.
cups?
You can be lucky depending on the draw, because you can win 3 cups and not play anyone even in the Premier League. Of course, they can't now because you see the FA Cup draw. But I don't look at competitions and see that as a marker as to who the best team is. Now, taking in consideration Liverpool haven't won 30 years, as far as I'm concerned, that would be immense. Manchester City, it'd be great if they won 3, Champions League as well. But for me, it'll be Liverpool. The league is the most important thing.
But Manchester City have never won the Champions League.
But I think
that's the holy grail that Pep Guardiola was brought into. He's won the Premier League more than once.
I think that's in context. That's what I'm saying. If you play for Manchester City, having already won the Premier League before, you're going to be going hell for leather to win that Champions League. And if you can win all 3 cups, that is a fantastic season. But if you play for Liverpool, who you've said never done it before, and you've already won the Champions League, you can say, you know what, Premier League is a priority. But
you don't play for either, so I'm asking you,
no,
as an independent...
I would love to win the Premier League. For me, 100%, I would love to win that Premier League, because that shows 38 games. There's difficult games. You go through periods where Liverpool are going through now. I know they've got a big gap.
Test.
It's a different test, and I just think to be the best in the Premier League, 38 games, you've got to be consistent enough to win. And for me, I'd love to have won the Premier League. But on a global scale, of course, the Champions League's the Champions League. But I agree with what John's saying there. You can be lucky with the draw in the group you're in, but Premier League, you can't be lucky to win 38 games or to go 38 games.
Are you slightly faltered? So, are you saying it is Liverpool? If that's how it finishes, Manchester City do the treble, and Liverpool win the Premier League, you still think Liverpool have had a better season than them?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think so.
Not next year. If we won the league this year and we won the league again next year, then I'll say Man City. But 30 years, we waited a long time.
I mean,
this is more bigger than the World Cup for us Scousers.
You're in and around Liverpool a lot, John. What is the feeling like up there at the moment?
Well,
how would you describe the atmosphere and what people are saying?
Well, it really depends, because my brother-in-law's an Evertonian. So half of the city and they're just so happy that obviously I think that we could have won it at Goodison had we won there, so they're just delighted about that. I would urge Liverpool fans, even when they were disappointed last year, and I said, not the Champions League, because I said, had we lost the Champions League last year, what that would have meant was that we lost 2 games all season. The Champions League and 1 game in the league to finish second in the league and get to the Champions League final, which would have been a magnificent season, but we'd be disappointed. Now, I'm urging Liverpool fans, if we lose to Atletico Madrid, to then say it's been a great year, because I think people will be disappointed. Yes, we've won the league, but they'll look at it as a bit of a dampener because we got out of the FA Cup and we got out of the Champions League. But I say, for 30 years we waited for this, so if they win the league, every Liverpool fan will be absolutely delighted. They'll forgive them going out to the Champions League.
You'd have signed for that at the beginning of the season, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Done, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the league. Come on. Come on.